This is episode 11 of the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. Welcome to the Sports Business Classroom audio experience. I'm your host, Sergio Millis, and each week I'll bring you an inspiring person or message to help you discover how to break in and succeed in sports and life. Thanks for spending some time with me today, and let the experience begin. This episode is brought to you by Sports Business Classroom, an immersive sports business training and educational experience dedicated to preparing future sports business professionals. It is a one-of-a-kind learning opportunity for those interested in the business of basketball and jobs in sports. Sports Business Classroom combines the best of all worlds into a single package: great academics, hands-on experience, immersion in the Las Vegas Summer League, and interaction with some of the best minds working in and around the NBA. For more information about Sports Business Classroom, go to sportsbusinessclassroom.com. This episode is also brought to you by Hall Pass Media, a full-service marketing agency that specializes in brand consulting, event management, digital marketing, and creative design. For more information on Hall Pass Media, go to hallpassnetwork.com. Today's guest is Mr. Matteo Zuretti, Chief International Relations and Marketing Officer for the NBA Players Association. Guys, I'm so excited to bring you this episode today, as Matteo is an unbelievably wise and experienced marketer and strategist that is turning corners globally for the game of basketball. At the start of the 2019-2020 NBA season, there were 108 international players from 38 countries on opening night rosters, and Matteo is leading the charge for all things global for the Players Association. The game of basketball is growing internationally at such an incredible rate, and it was so much fun to discuss this and so much more with Matteo. In this episode, we talk about his role with the Players Association, the differences between a player and a champion in both sports and life, and what it means to be a global citizen. I absolutely loved this conversation I had with Matteo and learned so much from him, and I know you will too. It's my sincere hope that after listening, you'll not only have learned a lot, but we'll be thinking about how you can make an impact globally. It's a big world out there, and the opportunities are truly endless if you just think big. Without further ado, I give you Mr. Matteo Zuretti. Matteo, thanks for joining us.
Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Pleasure and an honor. I thought we'd start off with where you grew up, what life was like as a kid, and what you were passionate about when you were young.
Sure. I grew up in Rome, Italy. Actually, I was born in Milan. My parents divorced pretty soon, and my dad stayed in Milan, and I lived in Rome with my mom, and a lot of back and forth by train in these two cities who are, if you want to compare a little bit, like New York and LA culture-wise. So I like to say that I took the best of both worlds. Really love those cities. Rome, though I think left the biggest, sign on me. It's a warm place. Relationships are a big part of it, of everything that goes down in the city. And I still enjoy to go to Milan every time I can and get the more industrial and fast-paced character of Milan that actually is coming in hand here in New York, where I moved 5 years ago. Fall in love with the game, I guess, like many of your listeners. Was around 11. Guess what? Michael Jordan's first final, as many people across the world, and never stop chasing that ball in so many different shapes and forms, though. Even because I was a pretty mediocre player, played some elite youth, but then when I saw that I couldn't turn this into a career on the court, when I started college, I just moved on a bench. My first coach was restarting this glorious program in Rome called Stella Azzurra. That is one of the top academies, youth academies in Europe. And he was restarting this, and he told me, I believe you can help me out reshaping this old program. And that was my next step, just coaching. Rome is a kind of forgotten city basketball-wise. Soccer is just the thing with 2 first division teams. The city is super passionate about that, even though we saw some big names coming through. Danny Ferry was out there after his Duke career, playing with Brian Shaw when I was a kid. I remember that was actually my very first basketball game I attended in a packed arena in Rome, which doesn't happen very often anymore, unfortunately. But then, yes, just going through my basketball experience as a coach has been super inspiring. Being exposed to young people all the time, trying to support their development, I guess, really left an important trace, in who I am as a person right now.
Yeah, so let me ask you about that. When you were young, did you always have an inclination towards coaching, or how did you make that jump from player to coach?
Not really. I guess really like not being a good player has pushed me in that direction. I've always hold myself against the higher standards. So if I'm not good at something, I really try to find a way to have an impact in another form. And I guess that's really what made my transition into coaching inevitable somehow, but also pleasant, because I immediately felt that I could have a role, a different role, and having an impact in the development of these young men.
So how long were you with the team for?
I was with the team for 6 years. In the last, probably from the third year, and I was very young. I started when I was 19, and after my 3 seasons as a coach, I kept having that function. We were a very small club, small academies. We were recruiting more and more players in Italy, but we wanted to take just a jump in terms of the quality of talent we were able to involve. And so I actually started our first and very artisanal player evaluation process and department, a small scouting department. And so I remember I was traveling around with my mentor, Germano D'Arcangeli, who's still the owner and the lead of Stella Azzurra program. And we were traveling all around Italy and also scout some international tournaments to identify talent and start the recruiting process with their families. We started to see some success and increasing the level of the players who were playing for the program. But we were still getting our butt kicked by these first division youth programs that had a lot of money at that time, and where professional teams were basically investing a lot of dollars for player development. Until one day we actually were able to secure a pretty special player, a pretty special talent, who was Andrea Bargnani, the former Raptors player, number 1 overall pick. And I thought that was a pretty key moment for me, because I had the chance to learn everything that goes into the recruiting and the development, and also the circus around a player of that potential and that caliber. And I guess that really sticked with me and somehow pushed my interest more towards player development than the actual X's and O's.
And was that your first exposure to a player that was, he's an incredible name. I'm sure in Italy, he's a superstar, super famous. Was that your first exposure to somebody that really warranted that kind of attention?
Yeah, definitely. At that time, Andrea was a late bloomer, but he just arrived into our program, and he was there for a little amount of time, because then he went and joined Coach Messina in Treviso, in Benetton Treviso.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, he made the jump to the league with the Raptors. But at that time, people started to see how good of a player, of a prospect he was. And yes, it was definitely the first time I was exposed to such special talent. And you realize how much of the mind aspect that takes into developing as a player, as a professional athlete. No matter how gifted you are as a basketball player, there will be one day where you will need to just figure it out from a mental perspective, and being able to manage all this attention, all this process. It's really demanding, and I have a lot of respect for these guys who globally go through that right now. And at that time, there was no internet, there was no Twitter. Internet was there already. There was a different type of scrutiny. It was much more in person. You could still represent somehow a hidden gem. Nowadays, as we know, that's very tough.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would see clubs and people just travel from all over to come see Andrea and other prospects that were playing with him, to evaluate the game. That scouting game has changed a lot in the last years, given social media, and I think even more nowadays, prospects need to have very, very solid foundation to be able to resist all that scrutiny and all that attention.
Absolutely. No, and we're definitely going to get into that when we start talking about your current role. But following your coaching stint, I know you said that you were there for 6 years as a coach?
Correct.
And then following that, what did you do?
Following that, as I mentioned, I had somehow this North Star, who was still the current one, was probably players, right, and their development, and support them in becoming the best version of themselves. My role as a coach and as a talent evaluator exposed me to one of the godfathers of the agent business in Europe at that time, whose name is Maurizio Balducci. Maurizio left us a few months ago, and unfortunately, and he has been absolutely what I define as my master. It took me, I was 24 and 25 actually, and it completely changed my perspective. And I remember me going into these meetings with him and these negotiations, bringing a young coach perspective where basketball was everything. And he taught me how basketball evaluations are for sure always a factor in any negotiation, in any conversation. But there are so many other factors that actually are going to influence the outcome of a career of a player, of a specific negotiation, of the success of a team. It flipped completely my perspective, and most importantly, from day one, which I will forever be thankful for, he had me in the room. I remember first time I traveled to the town called Perugia, that is a couple of hours from Rome, where the headquarters was based. He put the phone on speaker, and from day one, I found myself hearing his conversations with athletes, with GMs, with families, total full access from day one. And I guess that's the biggest currency, since we're talking to probably some students or a younger demographic, that you should negotiate for, because that's priceless.
Yeah. So what are some of the other experiences you got to have with Mauricio?
Core business with Mauricio's core business was actually top level EuroLeague players more than NBA guys like Šarūnas Jasikevičius, who's now coaches Žalgiris, 6-time EuroLeague champion, or Nikola Vujicic, or Gianluca Basile. If we have some EuroLeague fans out there, they will recognize these names. Szyskauskas, literally the legends of EuroLeague. And so I think the other great experience that he exposed me to was to deal with champions. And champions and players are not necessarily the same thing. And they do not think the same. There's something so unique about the way champions perceive their job and how they challenge themselves and how much they work. Again, mentally, it's not only a matter of how much you sweat and how much time you spend in the gym. It's a matter of how much demanding you are with yourself. And I remember being after a game, waiting outside of the locker room, players coming out after legendary games, after fantastic wins. And you can tell that was already over in their head. They were always thinking about the next challenge. And I guess that's always, that somehow also influenced the way I try to think about myself and about my development. Doesn't matter how big the failure or how great is the success that I'm getting now. It's what's next. How can I use what I just experienced to as a stepping stone to get in a new direction and to turn corners that were somehow unexplored.
Now, is this something that you learned or a skill that you developed, or how did that develop inside of you?
I think it's just being exposed to the right people. I don't know if it was part of me, but I really believe that we are the result of the people we are surrounded by. And of course, that triggers the experiences you go through. And so I think it's a lot about the people. And Maurizio had a great impact on my life at that time, and also afterwards. He was always a person who I could return to, even now that I am in the US. And at first, of course, it was not easy. It would always give me a different perspective, and taught me how to connect the dots, which is, I think, the other thing that I think is key. It was unbelievable just walking with him at a grocery store or in a street in Kaunas, Lithuania, or in Prague, Czech Republic. He would look at things and always try to connect them with his job and his life. At first, it was almost scary. I was like, this guy never disconnect. This guy never relax. But the reality is that was his competitive advantage. His brain was always spinning and was able to find connections between things and connecting dots that other people couldn't connect. That was also talent for him. He was a genius. But I think being around him for 12 years really helped me put that habit into practice every day, and I still keep doing it today.
Yeah, I mean, connecting the dots is such an amazing skill to have. And, I, like you, believe that, it's a skill, it's a habit, and it's a muscle. The more that you try to do it, the more you see dots being connected, the more that you make attempts at it. And you're absolutely right. Having the right people to show you the way and show you what's possible is incredibly powerful.
Agreed. And then, there's a lot of conversation around building a network in our industry, which we know it's very important. It's a key. I like to think that I found more than that. I like to think that I found a master. And actually, I would encourage everybody. It's just not shaking a hand or building a great relationship with somebody, but is having access to his head, to his mind, and not only to his roller decks that is going to make the difference, and convince him that this person should invest time in teaching you a job. And then if you are able to yourself connect the dots and maybe meet more than one person who's going to teach you different side of the jobs, that's when you become a well-rounded professional who's able to thrive and achieve great things.
Do you have any advice out there for listeners as far as finding a mentor or developing that relationship?
I think one of the things is we are exposed inevitably to the big shots. Like all the media are exposing to us always who are the people who are at the peak of the pyramid. And of course, they are there for a reason. That doesn't happen by itself. So if you have the chance to go and engage with president of basketball operation, commissioner of a league, or go for it. But there's so much expertise and so much real life experience, I think, also in people who just represent another piece of the food chain in our industry that I think maybe it's not as sexy, it's not as nice to tell yourself in the mirror, hey, today I spoke with this guy, but maybe it's going to carry bigger value for you down the road.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I think, I've been fortunate to have some amazing mentors and, Warren Legary and Albert Hall and George Raveling. And I don't know where I would be today if I didn't have them in my life and they didn't show me the way and really how to be a winner. Right. I mean, it's so crucial that you connect with people that are playing at the level that you want to be at so that you really understand what it takes to get there. And not only get there, but stay at that level, right? Because like you said, being a champion in that mindset is a completely different mindset than being a player. It just is, right? And unless you're exposed to it, you absolutely have no idea what it takes to continue to win.
Yeah, and our players, the NBA players, are a living example of many things, but also of this. 4.5 years is the average career of an NBA player. 4.5. It's like a wink of an eye. It's so quick, and the ones who are able to extend every year that period, that commitment. That again, it's mostly mental. Have all my respect because they have the toughest job in the world, and that's from the player side. But you just mentioned your 3 mentors. Woo, that's a pretty impressive group of guys who have been shaping the industry, for a long time. Also touching so many different aspects, right, of our industry, of our game. Definitely all inspiring people.
Yeah, so I want to get into your current job, right? So you're currently the Chief International Relations and Marketing Officer for the NBPA. Can you just give a brief overview of what the NBPA is and what you do?
Sure. The NBPA is the union that represents the 450 NBA players. So the league is the association of the 30 owners. We are the association of the 450 players. And these 2 entities, the NBA and the NBPA, negotiate the collective bargaining agreement. So that's what you would expect from a sports union, probably since 30, 20 years ago, a bargaining unit. The reality is that in the last years, the level of sophistication of our players have pushed our organization to reshape itself. And so when you think about the NBPA, imagine it as an umbrella that has then 3 different verticals. There is the union things, the union stuff. A player gets in trouble, players need legal support, a player gets a fine, fights with his agent. There can be many different union-related things. As I said, the CBA negotiation factor, where we negotiate, the rules basically that determines the salary, the working condition of the guys. All of this is the union. This is one vertical. Then there is the NBPA Foundation, and that's our nonprofit arm. Do you know, Sergio, where players get fined, where the money go?
I do not.
So 50% of them money go actually inside the NBPA Foundation. That was something that the union have negotiated in the past, and that 50% of money then are redistributed through the players themselves and their nonprofit efforts in their communities, globally, because of course now 25% of our guys are born outside the United States. So that's the second vertical. Imagine all our nonprofit work. And then there is the third one, which is kind of a startup because the inception was only 2 years ago, which is PI, all right, as we like to call it internally, it's Think 450, which is our for-profit arm. So every player can have his individual deals with different brands and negotiate their individual deals, but there are also some products, the jerseys, video games, trading cards, and three are the major categories that need to use all the names and likenesses of the players all together. And so they don't go player by player to negotiate those rights, and that the players grant them these rights, but they come to us because the players give us their 1/450th of the collective rights of the group licensing rights to us. And so there is a business that the guys decided after a while to bring back here with the PA, because we rented those rights to the league for 20 plus years in the past. That is our for-profit arm. So it's NBPA, I think, for 50. So the umbrella, the three verticals, the union, the NBPA Foundation, and NBPI represent our organization. What we do at the international department is basically set up our international strategy cross-functionally across these three different verticals. And it's a continuous evolvement of our function, because when Michelle brought me here from Italy, this is my 5th season with the organization, we didn't have any international activity or any international department. So I arrived, I was a one-man band, and we had to start all over again from basically a group of players, the international guys, who were pretty much disconnected from the union because they were never served before, or better, they were never served for their specific needs. And that's what we really made an effort, is by talking to them, by identifying leadership among them, is, okay, so what do you guys really need? What are the things that we can support you in making your life better? And so that was the very beginning of the effort here internally. Then we started to engage with the international stakeholders who had an impact on our players' life. So the leagues that they play in before they come to the NBA, the leagues where they play after they after they leave the NBA, the governing bodies, whether it's FIBA or their national federations where they spend part of their summers, the other players association, whether they are basketball, National Basketball Players Association, or also from other sports. We can learn so much, and we are in constant contact with FIFPro, that is the Global Soccer Union, with cricket, that you say cricket? No, cricket is watched every day by billions of people around the world, and some of their athletes are in certain area of the world real mega stars. And so, or AFL, they are so far advanced in terms of player development, Australian Football League, player development and the medical aspect of it. Go through the list of the medical staff of the 30 NBA teams, and you'll see how many Australian guys are actually part of those teams. And that's for a reason, because there's so much expertise globally that is born and nurtured inside these other sports, that us as an organization also we need to deep into, to make sure that we are and we can be a golden standard in the world of player association globally.
It sounds like a fascinating job and a huge job. What does your current day-to-day look like? I'm sure no 2 days look the same, but just if you could paint a picture for the audience, the types of things that you're working on a day-to-day.
Yeah, you nailed it. So it's really not day like the other. We have built a team in the end since I arrived. So now we have 5 people, and we are able to work with specific responsibilities in one and each of these verticals. So a lot of my time is to set up the strategy and make sure that we advance on our projects. When I'm in the office, there's a significant amount of traveling, both in the US. We go and we visit players. We go and we have our union meetings with our senior management, where we go and present and this is the season of, that's exactly the season we are in right now, where we go and we present to players, the issues or the opportunities that are on our table, so that every player is educated on what we are working on and give their input. Michel has been pushing a players first culture, and that's not only about thinking about players always and put their interests ahead of anything else, but it's also to get direction from the players. They are so smart and sophisticated, and they are, as you know, philanthropists, global philanthropists, and amazing entrepreneurs, and they are exposed to the top people in so many different fields that there's so much we can learn from them by having a constant contact. And that's honestly a big part of what I do. And what my team does is to be in touch with them, making sure that we are up to speed with what their projects are, what their issues are, and liaise basically with all the resources that we have here internally, and make sure that these resources actually can answer the specific needs of our international players. Very often I'm the guy in the room raising my hand and saying, how can we make sure that these actually translate to what our international players are experiencing? That's another big part of what I do.
And I know ongoing education is very, very important to you. I've read about the International Business Academy. Can you speak to your role as an educator and somebody that's constantly trying to make sure that the players are aware of what the opportunities are and how to brand themselves globally are?
Sure. When we started this new regime with Michel, one of the things that we immediately noticed is that we didn't have any international program. And many of our guys spend their off season abroad, right? The international players are basically there, and 70% of them are from Europe. So we have identified the opportunity to have a program in Europe as something that could address a specific need. I want to grow. I want to develop as a person. I don't necessarily want to jump on a plane again and coming back to the US when I'm home and with my family, taking care of my business back home, reconnecting with my culture. And this is one foundation of the program. The other foundation of the program is that, and that was a big cultural shock for me. When I got here, I started to hear this mantra that the guys, since they are teenagers, grew up here. You are a brand, grow your brand, protect your brand. And that's all true. But my question to them was and is very often, what is a brand? Are you truly aware of what a brand is? And the reality is that there's not true understanding of what to create, develop, and protect a brand entails.
So before you go on, can you tell us what your definition of a brand is?
A brand is what differentiates yourself from anything and everybody else. That's my 2 cents on what a brand is. And then the implementation of the strategy to take advantage of all these global opportunities that the guys are always reminded of, and that it's true, it's a global game, are out there. But what do you need to have skills-wise to be able to implement a plan that will be able, after you identified your brand, to scale it globally?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you need something that we have defined during our program that takes place in Milan. We had three editions, and we're going back one more time in June. We call it cultural agility. It's connected with the idea of cultural agility, which is your capacity to operate in a multicultural environment. You can be the strongest brand out there, but if inside at the meeting table, at a conference, in a private conversation, you're not able to connect and speak the language that your audience or your counterpart are able to understand and value, well, your brand is not going to go that far. And sometimes, as much as we are in a global world and we have access to global stimuli through social media, through the web, etc., you'll be surprised on how many of us actually went and go through, and when I say us, I mean us internally here, and our players go through an assessment of our multicultural agility. You'll be surprised how many of us actually can improve from that perspective.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. How does one improve their multicultural agility? What do those programs look like?
Yeah, I think there's a matter of awareness, and the biggest tool to improve from a cultural agility perspective is going out your comfort zone and listen. And there's no better way to do that than to travel, obviously. So passport ready and being curious to go out of the inevitable path that maybe an organized travel will actually take you through, and trying to connect with local people. And as you said, the muscle, right? That's another muscle that you definitely want to train and keep working on. It's your capacity to listen, to connect, to respect other people's views, and to be able to adapt to other cultures, to make sure that your message and where you want to go is actually going to be possible. Because you can go by yourself, but if you want to go somewhere with somebody else, well, you gotta find a way to go there together, and the way to connect is way too important. So in terms of what we do in Milan and what we provide the players, we have an assessment that actually help them identify the strengths and weaknesses in their cultural agility traits. And then we actually walk them through a global experience itself. We bring in global brands. We have international professors and international guest speakers, usually CMOs and CEOs of huge companies. We had companies that the guys love, of course, so we get their attention, whether it's Lamborghini, it's Versace, it's Moncler, it's in the food and beverage space, in the wine space, since now it's one of the things that the guys are most passionate about. And we have these professionals coming in and not just telling you, hey, buy a Lamborghini, but hey, this is our 5-year plan. This is how we are thinking to attack the female high spenders globally, because so much of the wealth are actually shifting from the pockets of the men to the pockets of the women.
Right.
So it's really a well-rounded set of stimuli that and global stimuli that we try to present the guys. And of course, it's not that we are going to build their cultural agility or their knowledge about the brand in 4 days. But what we look to do is to spark an interest, to spark curiosity, so that to share maybe that path with their manager or their business partner or their personal partners, significant others, so that once they're back in the US and they're going through their career and they're playing every other night, somebody else is actually picking up and continue that conversation. And there is a shared pathway that has been observed and lived together.
Right. And how has the interest been so far from the players?
That's been growing every year by year. We had 14 players last year. The thing we are most proud of is that it's engaging a younger demographic. We decided, and that's also another of the reasons why we created this program. We decided to stop associating the idea of programs and player development being associated with retirement or all approach to retirement, and that panic that inevitably sparks in athletes who have been fantastic in doing one thing all their life, and maybe they didn't dedicate enough time in acquiring other skills. And we said, how can we give guys in their 20s something that they could be interested of, so that we can spark that interest and that curiosity that will lead them to do many other of these programs that are with the PA, they are with the NBA, there are in universities now providing this type of courses and development opportunity for athletes, and so that the guys can actually take advantage of their full access, because everybody's going to pick up their phone during their careers since they're very young, so that they have time to build. And we have great examples. Look at what Andre Iguodala is doing. And that has started several years ago. It's not that he woke up one day at 30 years old being an NBA champion and saying, okay, I want to start to invest in startups. I want to take advantage of me being in the Silicon Valley. No, he educated himself, he built a team, and he went out there. And that has started much earlier. And that's when he leverages access, which is the biggest asset that the guys have.
No question. Now, I'm just curious regarding just global strategy for the PA. What are the other pillars, if you can speak about them? Like, what are the other programs that you're currently working on?
Yeah, I think one of the things we're really passionate about is to help the international players keeping a live and healthy connection to their country. When I say to their country, I mean their culture. There is almost, I know it might sound weird for U.S. audience, but there's almost a sin that is perceived to be done by the international players when they arrive in the league. They are successful, they are well compensated, they are across the ocean. And me, let's assume I'm an Italian fan, I cannot touch them. I cannot look at them. I cannot enjoy them for almost 10 months per year, every year, okay? So when the guys go back home, that's when they are somehow assaulted by so many different attention, so which is obviously super appreciated by all of them. But how do we make sure that the guys keep that connection alive? Mm-hmm. Many of them have resources, personal teams who work on that. We want to keep. We are working closely with many of them to make sure that connection is alive, that the legacy that our players are creating by playing in the best league in the world can keep generating results and become fruitful back home. So that's definitely one of the things we're looking at.
No, it's fascinating, and it makes a ton of sense, right? I mean, because you're absolutely right. These guys have left their home countries, right? Their original fan base is no longer as in touch as they used to be with them. And when they go home, I'm sure that they need to be very strategic about the things they're involved in, how they spend their time, who they associate with, right?
Definitely. And then there is an inclusion factor. And that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of is when we started this new regime with Michel, we had no international players involved in any leadership capacity with the union. And if you are one of the 108 international players and you don't see anybody that share your same path and your same struggle or problems or challenges, more simply, representing you, that's going to be tough. So we have really tried to encourage and support players who had an interest and had also the right mindset to take leadership position inside the organization. And to this, I'm super thankful to Pau Gasol. I remember when I started my job, I went to different players, and he was one of them. And I told him, I said, Pau, I need a leader. I need somebody who can prove everybody else and that the organization cares for global issues that the players face, and then have that leadership capacity and also the status, honestly, to carry that message with a certain load. And Pau was the perfect fit. NBA champion, one of the most successful FIBA player of all time, all-star, a fantastic mind, such an articulate person, and he had a terrific impact in everything that we have done. And now it's great because as he's getting ready, to transition, he's already looking at other leadership position in the global space, and he's actually going to run to have an Olympic Committee athletes group role as an athletes representative with the Olympic Committee. And it's great, and it's great to think that maybe part of this is also because he embraced his role with us, and that inspired other international players to join later. So Bismack Biyombo now is on executive committee, and he's helping us think about Africa in a certain way. We have Dwight Powell on the competition committee, who's giving a terrific support, and Sergi Baca is on the board of the foundation. And I look forward to have more of these global citizens bring a global perspective to everything that we do through a leadership position.
Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. Now, I'm curious, we've talked about a lot of the good things. What are some of the challenges you face right now with the different programs and strategies that you're trying to execute?
I think the biggest challenge we have as an organization is the constant conflict between serving 450 different guys, and so trying to acknowledge their individual stories and their individual challenges and needs, and the fact that in the end we have to go out and be strong as one. As one unit, and this idea of being a brotherhood is well present in most of our players, but we know that we're going to be successful only if we're going to be able to bring value to them individually as well. And so I think that's the constant balance that we need to find, and that, of course, working with international players, that the conflict is even magnified by the fact that they do not even share the same culture.
Right.
And by the way, it's like, let's think about these guys. Let's stop also associating them only with one flag. So if you think a ton maker, you say, okay, he's Australian. Well, he's Sudanese, who grew up in Australia, who played in Canada and played in the US. It's like, what's his culture? He's a global citizen. He's a global mind. If I go back with Thiago Splitter, he comes from a family of German immigrants, and then he went when he was 14 in Spain, and then actually found himself in the Basque Country, which has a different culture, and then he came to the US. These guys, by the time they are 30, they have been through so many experiences in so many different places that thinking for us to think linearly that they represent one country and they have one culture is going to set up for failure. So we need to make the effort to understand their individual stories, serve those individual needs, but at the same time find this connecting the dots, as we were saying before, and finding solution that touches as many lives as possible.
So there's currently over 100 international players in the NBA. I think the number is 110 or so.
108.
108. Do you spend time individually with all 108 guys?
Yes, definitely. That's the goal. We're trying to be very strategic about it. We know that there are players who need more and players who need less, players who are more interested in what we do and players who are less interested. And so we call it the mega file. we work with my team to actually develop a data centered approach to our interactions with the players to make sure that we are able to don't forget anybody behind, not focus always on the same people, be present in the key moments when our guys have some significant, they go through significant undertaking. Yes, we do interact with all of them. Do I have the same relationship with all 108? Obviously not. But I think we have been working successfully in delivering the message that the PA is here with many resources, and we're always ready. Whenever one of them call us, we have the resource that they need, or we are ready to point them in the right direction to solve their issues.
How big is your team?
We are 5 people.
Okay, and what if you could explain to the audience what those 5 people's roles are?
Yeah, so as I was telling you, we work cross-functionally. So there's we have these international meetings where we have somebody working, a manager working. His name is Ivan Magis from Argentina. He works on the union side of things, and his big focus right now is player engagement and player interaction. You'll definitely see him on a court somewhere around the U.S., and not only the U.S. He was in China recently. We try to be where the players are. Oliver Castamagna, he works on the PI side, another global citizen, half Italian, grew up in London, studying in the French school. His mom is Australian. So really trying to bring a different diversity in the way we look at things. And then on the foundation side, Liz, who doesn't report to me, reports to the head of the foundation, who's Sherry Deans, but who have been working very close together. We have done projects with players in 20 different countries. Liz is the liaison between us and the foundation, so she's present in all our meetings, and we try to involve her as much as possible. And then there's Bianca, who's my assistant, and keep us all aligned and on track with everything that we do.
How many days a year would you say you're on the road?
I never count them, otherwise I think I would get scared.
But or let's rephrase the question. How many different countries do you visit per year, roughly?
And I'm serious. I never made that count. But I can tell you, my last summer I was in Europe in 3 different countries. I was in Senegal, I was in Japan, I was in India, I was in China, I was in Australia. So there's a lot of traveling in my life. That's a blessing for all the reasons we discussed around the possibility to use that muscle and to trade that muscle, the cultural agility muscle.
Sure.
When you do it for a living, it also becomes, of course, demanding also for my family, because I'm away a lot. But my wife luckily is super supportive, and I try to bring part of those experiences back home in our household, and just trying to educate two global citizens, my daughters.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic theme, the theme of being a global citizen, right? I mean, I think so many people that are listening, when they think about sports business and sports business jobs, they think about jobs in the US. But the truth of the matter is it's a big world out there, right? And there are a ton of opportunities out there. So I'd be curious what your thoughts are on, you know, people who were born and raised in the US and go to school in the US who want to break into sports. Can you speak to some of the opportunities that there are abroad and experiences they could gain abroad?
Definitely. The first thing I would say is get a passport. Start to
Yeah.
travel, regardless of the actual opportunities, because you will not be able to capitalize and be ready for those opportunities if you haven't been training the muscle we have been talking about. So that's step one. Step two is also understanding that the sports industry in the US is a very mature, hyper mature space, and that you might not find the same conditions and the same foundation and the same resources abroad, but that abroad, if you are culturally agile, can give you so much in terms of network, in terms of acquiring different skills and a different vision that then will become or could become one day helpful for a US organization.
An opportunity, right? I mean, especially in places like you said that may not be as mature as the US. To me, when I hear you say that, I think, well, that's for the right person with the right mindset and the right skills. That's opportunity. That's an opportunity for you to make your name somewhere.
Absolutely. There are so many developing markets out there that, again, do not have the same resources that you would find in the US, and you need to be able to navigate. But you can go out in India nowadays, right? The China market is somehow mature. Europe is going through, I believe, a pretty significant transition right now, and the old sports industry is somehow remodeling against the US one. Africa, Australia, who loves basketball is listening to us. I'm sure they are following the amazing job that the NBL is doing down in Australia, creating a valuable product. And LaMelo is only presence down there. It's only the peak of the iceberg of a solid league that is investing in creating a product. I think there's access that you can build, and more important, you should never discount the fact that for the people abroad, you're bringing America to them as well. So what are the things that you can take from America that you can translate into the reality you are stepping in? If you go and you think that everything that you saw here is going to work, you're setting up yourself for failure. But if you make an analysis, and that takes some research time and meeting the right people and have a lot of conversation and being curious, but you're able to take few elements of what you've been exposed maybe until now in the US, and you plug it in the reality abroad, that is where you're bringing value. And so you have access. So that's when you learn things abroad. And that's maybe where you're going to be able to bring value back here in the US. If you don't fall in love with somebody out there, you don't stay abroad for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. So I'm sure you come into contact with a lot of young people, and people are constantly asking you for advice as far as how to break into sports, how to get a job in basketball, whatever it might be. What is some of the advice that you like to give for young people who are trying to make a name for themselves?
Being exposed to as many different things as possible. I know we live in a highly specialized world. And I know all of these young people probably have a goal. And so if they want to be the president of basketball operation in 10 years, here they go, and they want to be exposed to CBA stuff. If we're talking about, teams, professional teams in the US, well, there are so many other things you need to know and so many other skills you need to have to be able to be a successful leader of a professional team. And if you are a marketing person for a league or for a club itself, what are the other skills that you will need to have to be able to be successful? I think I feel there is a kind of a rush in specializing, and the kind of a rush in getting returns of, the seeds that you're planting daily when you're young. And I think that's the biggest problem. We live in a world of instant satisfaction, but our industry doesn't contemplate that. It takes time, it takes patience. Even mutuating your expression, um, Sergio, it's make a name for yourself. Okay, but what about learning things before making a name for yourself? I think that's really step one, is finding a master, as we were saying before, or different masters, and learn skills, connect them all together, and then have a package that can be used by somebody that you have met along the road. I think that's the only formula. And patience probably is the number one thing you need to take into account.
Absolutely. And the other thing I've heard you speak about quite a bit is just being confident, and the importance of confidence and putting yourself out there. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. I think all of us have our own personality, and in particular in the sports industry, people just have, I think, a sixth sense in smelling bullshit. And so you want to be authentic. You want to be who you can be, who you can sustain. You have to make custom tailor-made suit, wear it with confidence, but it's a tailor-made one. So it has to fit who you are as a person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm curious, do you have any advice for people as far as different ways to build their their sense of confidence, or become more self-aware about who they are so that they can wear that suit properly?
That's a great question. I think is not try to match stereotypes, not try to match what is ideal today. Like, we are exposed to perfection every day through our social media. If I scroll through my feed, I see so many fantastic people that look so close to me, but only on my feed. The reality, they
You're
are
right.
so far removed from us. And I think it's imperfection, and being who you are, and bring your own cultural background is a value. Don't try to plasm yourself, adapt yourself to a standard, because there's no standard. Your biggest aspiration should be to have people looking for you and who you are.
Right.
And to know who you are, you have to look at the mirror and be honest with yourself.
No, and I 100% agree. From all of the guests that we've had thus far on the show, everybody talks about being self-aware, but also being authentic, right? And that when you're your authentic self, that's when your best self comes out. So thank you so much for echoing that, because I think you're absolutely right. These days, on social media or TV or the news, right? We're all exposed to perfection all day long, right? And the truth of the matter is, like you said, that simply does not exist. And what people should strive to be is the best version of themselves. Now, I'm curious, do you have any daily habits? Anything that you must do every single day, whether it's reading, learning, and anything that might help the audience understand a little bit about, what your daily rituals might be?
I need to get better at that, Sergio. That's definitely of the areas I think I need to improve. I find myself sucked into all these different stimuli. As I love to connect the dots, sometimes the dots get the best of me. And so I find myself bouncing around a little bit too much. Um, and so I would say that what I've been trying to do lately more and more is to find some time where I'm disconnected, honestly. I travel a lot, as I told you, and as you know, and one of the things I've committed is I'm not going to buy Wi-Fi on airplane. That's my time to think. That's my time to do something different without being sucked into a fantastic and very attractive world, but that somehow make me lose focus and just make me think less. The abundance of stimuli make us just take the wrong path sometimes. So daily habit, not buying Wi-Fi, which is not daily though, but it's not buying Wi-Fi on an airplane. And maybe I should put airplane mode on my phone more often. Let's put it that way. Also in my daily routine.
And what do you do on the planes?
Taking notes, reading, writing, literally taking all these different bits of information and pieces of my professional, personal life that are in my head, in this big cloud over my head, and trying to give them a sense, to connect them, to make sure that they become bigger ideas. So it's connecting the dots and give them and shape them so that then we can come up with an action plan once I'm down from the plane with my team and trying to make things happen.
So a few final questions here, if you have a few minutes. Keys to your success. What do you think they've been?
Curiosity, luck.
Curiosity and luck. I mean, being curious, I think, what I've heard from you this whole conversation is, learning and the importance of mindset and the importance of connecting the dots and finding the right mentors. So I think, curiosity is definitely an important trait to have. Is that something you think people can develop?
No, I don't think so. I think curiosity is something probably you develop in your very young age. It depends a lot by the people you were around when you were a kid, and if they have nurtured to, if you are nurtured to think in a certain way. I give 100% of that to my dad, who's like probably the most curious person I've ever met. And once you're curious, that is when you engage people, because to learn more about the world and know more about the people, you need to engage with them. And so it's like it's this very positive circle you find yourself in, where you want to know more and you engage more people and you have a bigger network and you establish deeper relationship with people. Mm-hmm. Because I think another one of the big misconceptions is having a network means that I can go and shake hands or send a text. But the reality is that you have a network only when you have meaningful relationships with the people, or at least that's how I interpret it. And I value my network. I don't consider part of my network people, and there's a ton that I engage and I talk to, but I want to have meaningful, deeper relationship with folks, and that is triggered by that curiosity.
Yeah. No. How does one develop deep relationships with people, or what do you think are the pillars for that?
I believe not as always. I don't need to check in with people once a week or once a month. I hate those texts. Hey, how you doing? Checking in.
Yeah.
What does that mean? So you're just reminding me that you exist?
Yeah, that you're alive, right?
I don't want to be that person. I know that the people I want to build a relationship with will value the fact that once I'm reaching out is because I have something to learn from them. I have something to ask to them. I have something to tell them, or I have something I want to share with them. That is what develops meaningful relationship. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of superficial engagements that will not take you anywhere.
I completely agree. Have you ever had a major screw up or failure? And if so, what did you learn from it? And one of the reasons why I asked this question to our guests is that it's so easy to hear somebody on a podcast or a show, and people just put people just put these professionals that have really cool jobs up on a pedestal like they've never done anything wrong before, right? So part of the reason why I asked this question is to try to humanize the people that we have on the show. So any screw ups or failures that you care to share?
Yeah, I so without going into details, because maybe it's too big to share, right? The screw up. But no, the I think I like to take calculated risks, and that comes with the possibility to fail. We're going through right now a situation here where I've taken a risk, and I've pushed uh, to bring on board a partner that is not proving to be the right partner for one of the things that we're trying to achieve here, and I have involved other departments here at the PA in that work, and so having the respect and the consideration of the people you work with is another key to success. If you want to add it to the previous list, and every time there is this type of situation is when your credibility gets somehow hit it by a screw up or a negative outcome. And I know only one way to fix that is to be upfront, to not cover the fact that you involved some of your teammates in something that is not working out, and that you made the wrong evaluation. Acknowledge it. Thanks for the support, and keep looking ahead and trying to regain that trust that maybe you lost along the way.
It's very good advice. And along that note, what's one piece of advice you've received in your career that you'd want to pass along to the next wave of talent?
It's about perfection. The perfection doesn't really exist. Don't to be hard on yourself. I have that tendency a little bit when things don't go as I want it to be, and I don't perform at the level I want it to be. I tend to be hard on myself. And this is a story I'm happy to share, and I'm super thankful to my current boss, who's Michelle Roberts. One of the biggest challenges I had when I came here was, even if I was using English all the time as a business tool, talking with players from and stakeholders in the sports industry from 20 different countries all over Europe, all over the world, I thought I could speak English. But the reality, my English was even worse than now. So when I found myself around in our boardroom, in our senior management meeting, damn, I felt so unequipped. And I like to think that I'm a pretty articulate person in Italian, and I'm working hard every day to try to get closer also in my second language, which is English. But at that time, I was struggling, Sergio. I was struggling. I was hating it. I was hating every single minute of my interaction with these top-level executives that were there waiting for me to find the right words to express something that their head probably already understood just looking at my face. and one day, Michelle came to me and said, "Matteo, we love the way you are. We love the way you talk. Stop being so hard on yourself, and just, we actually find it fascinating the way you express certain concepts, even if it's not the perfect English way to expose them." And so that opened up a brand new world for me. I dropped the idea of being able to speak a perfect English, which I will never be able to do, even maybe in 20 years from now if I will keep living in the US. But that's, I think, a good example of how sometimes like a boss, a mentor, a colleague, anybody can come to you and just unhook you from the biggest threat to you that many times is yourself.
Sometimes it's all just in your head, right?
Correct.
Do you have any asks or requests for the audience?
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, is there anything you'd like them to look into? Anything that you'd like to encourage them to learn about? Just anything you'd like our audience to engage with.
I would love for your audience to pay more attention to the life that our players conduct, and how tough it is. Stop thinking that only because they are well compensated, anything that happens to them is necessary, and that it's out of this world if some of them fail, or if some of them decide to take a different path, or if some of them can just make mistakes. As many have said, they're human beings. There are some great words that Draymond Green have spent around, for example, Kevin Durant's changing team, that I think should, if you want to work in the sports industry and work with athletes, you should definitely pay a lot of attention to, because you will soon discover how the human aspect is much more relevant and important also for the on-court success to the guys than what they do with the ball in their hands.
Well, Matteo, thank you so much for taking time out of your super busy day. Can't tell you how thankful I am that you took the time, and that you painted that picture that it's a global world, it's a global game. I think it's a message that everybody needs to hear, and I just want to let you know that I appreciate you. Before we sign off, where can people find you online?
At Matteo Zuretti, MatteoZuretti. That's pretty much consistent on all my social media. I'm not a big, I don't post that much, but when I do, I think
when you do, it's important, right?
No, when I do, I like to share what actually has an impact on my way of looking at things. So maybe that will also help other people just keep evolving, as I try to do every day.
Absolutely. It's a fantastic message. Matteo, thanks again. We really appreciate you and hope we can do this again soon.
Thank you, Sergio. Thank you for having me.
There you have it, my friends. I hope you enjoyed this interview with the Chief International Relations and Marketing Officer for the NBA Players Association, Matteo Zuretti. You can find the show notes for everything we discussed at sportsbusinessclassroom.com/Matteo-Zuretti. That's MATTEO-ZURETTI. Guys, I want to thank you for all your support thus far. The feedback has been incredible, and I can't thank you enough for all of your efforts in helping spread the word about the show. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with your friends, family, and anyone you think might be able to get something out of it. And if you can, please take a few minutes to review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you have any follow-up questions for Matteo or myself, you can leave a comment on the site or send us your questions on social media by tagging us at Sports Business Classroom or at Matteo Zuretti. Big thank you to our sponsors, Sports Business Classroom Online and Hall Pass Media, and thanks again for listening. We will see you here next week on the Sports Business Classroom audio experience.